Hello, I'm Kimberly Dondo, Digital Content Manager, and welcome to In Conversation With, the podcast series that delves into the world of financial services and brings you face to face with some of the most notable figures in the industry. Listen as we discuss topics that are currently facing the industry and hear from visionary CEOs to disruptive innovators as we bring you a diverse array of voices and perspectives. We'll explore the challenges they faced, the lessons they've learned, and the insights they have to share about the ever-evolving landscape of financial services. Hello and welcome to In Conversation With. I'm Kimberly Dondo, and in today's episode, I'm joined by Alexander Thomas. So Alex, could you give us a bit of background into yourself and how you got started in financial services?
Hi Kim, thank you very much for having me. So I am an independent financial advisor. I've been advising for nearly 4 years. Originally, my first introduction to finance was working for a company in Barcelona when I was really young. I was about 22. The easiest way of saying it is I didn't quite align with the business. So I left sunny Spain and came back to England and worked in sales for a couple of years to own my communication skills, we'll put it that way. And from 2020, joined a business in Odeby, passed my qualifications, worked as an admin, power planner, and then started advising at the start of 2022.
So you've described your early years as a baptism by fire, cold calling, door-to-door sales, and the works. So how did those influence the advisor you are today?
It's a good question. So when I did join that business in Barcelona, I very much got thrown in the deep end. I thought I was going to go through the ranks of similar admin, power planning, financial advice. And when I arrived, I was given essentially a phone book and a handset and told to cold call. And that was really scary as a 22-year-old. So it made me quite quickly realize that whilst I liked finance, I had zero confidence. So when I left and came back to the UK, I thought, okay, if I'm going to be a successful financial advisor one day, although I'm pretty good at the finance side, I really need to nail this communication element. So begrudgingly, I went into sales roles purely for the process of let's learn how to sell. You know, although I'm not really a salesman, it's the skills that come with selling that help you to become better at giving advice. So, you know, communication, negotiation, things like that, explanation. So, yeah, I did cold calling, I did door-to-door sales, I did field sales, things like that. And it was really challenging, sometimes, you know, embarrassing. People say horrible things to you when you're knocking on their door at all hours of the day. But it really helped to build character. It made me a very resilient person because sometimes people don't want to hear the right thing necessarily, and you need to tell them that. So, yeah, really, really useful. And I think I put myself through the trenches, but it was for the right reasons.
Yeah. And when you were in Barcelona, were you serving like British clients who were out there?
Yeah, so they were all British expatriates, but they'd moved to different countries. So they weren't necessarily in Barcelona. They could have been in Germany, Switzerland, but I was calling them from Barcelona, which arguably made it look even stranger.
I mean, well, it's an interesting aspect, but I guess you got exposed to something different. I think most IFAs tend to kind of focus on just people within the UK, but being able to kind of deal with different expats, I guess it's also different cases that you would deal with.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I well and truly got thrown in the deep end. So I was learning about, you know, international advice, QOps, if you've ever heard of something like that. But yeah, it was so much complicated cross-border advice and things like that. And as someone that had just dipped their toes in the water, you were seeing some really complicated stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, well in over my head, I think, as a postgraduate, but it really opened your eyes to what actually was going on out there in the world of advice.
Yeah, no, sometimes I think that's the best way to be thrown in the deep end, because then you figure out if you can swim.
Exactly.
So you're now an IFA and a content creator, as well as a landlord and startup investor, all things that I found by stalking your LinkedIn. So how do you manage the balance, and which of these roles do you think most shapes your identity?
It's a good question. And the only role that I haven't put on LinkedIn is, as of 6 months ago, I'm also a father.
Okay.
And that's probably the one that is also the most time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that I've managed to balance them all, probably with also including fatherhood, is leverage. So property is the easiest example. So when I decided I was going to purchase a buy-to-let property, I knew from the very get-go I didn't want to manage it myself. So I employed the services of a letting agent or a property manager. And I thought, well, if I can hand everything over to them, pay them a monthly management fee, it's just going to remove, one, the stress element of it, but two, the time element of it. So I can continue focusing on what I want to, whether that's family, whether that's work, etc., etc. And that's something I'm happy to do, because if I'm having to focus on remembering when I need to do a gas safety certificate or an electrical inspection, or finding a contractor or an electrician to go and fix things for me when things go wrong, or block toilets, people always talk about that with property. That's just hassle for me, and I still have to pay for things. But if I haven't got to do all the liaising, I can just leverage the letting agents' work. That makes my life a lot easier. So, and I'm happy to pay for that service. And it's similar from all the other aspects. So with content creation, which is probably the second most time consuming thing I do after fatherhood, which I can't, it's difficult to leverage fatherhood. With content creation, I like the trial and error approach. So I'll just make, I suppose I haven't really touched on that. So for people listening, I like to make finance content that's easy to understand, because it can be very confusing. Tax, pensions, investing, all sorts. I like the trial and error method, where I would post various things over and over again until I find something that works. But at the same time, that would take a lot of time if I was just making 1,000 posts until something worked. So I will leverage other creators that are working, and not in the sense that I'm stealing content or stealing ideas, but you get inspiration from others. And there's the phrase that you steal like an artist.
Yeah.
Where you see what's working, you take inspiration from that and make it in your own way. So that's how I leverage social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that is probably the best way, because content creation, I think a lot of people don't take it seriously, but it does take a lot of time, from scripting to editing, market research, which is what you're talking about there, where you're looking at, what's working out there, like what kind of content is hitting or what platforms are working for people. That can all be very time consuming. But yeah, if you have the dedication, you're able to do that. So was there a moment where you thought, yes, this is working? And what did that feel like?
100%. So I think if we stick on the element of content creation, I started making content in August 2023. So we're coming up to my 2-year anniversary, if we can call it that. And for 6 months, to not sound crude, I was farting in the wind with content. Arguably zero views, 0 comments, 0 likes, other than my mum being my biggest supporter in the world, which is really cute. But it's
very important. Family is the most important fans, I think.
It's very important, but it's not very helpful from an engagement point of view than when she shares it on Facebook or whatever. But you trial and error, you buy a cheap course here or there to help you learn about the algorithms and making the right type of content, things like that. And one day I again tried a type of post, and it suddenly got 30,000 views, which in social media standards isn't amazing, but at up to that point I'd been getting maybe 300 or 400 views. So that was 10,000 more. That was 1,000 more than I'd ever had. And I thought 1,000% more than I'd ever had. And I thought, bloody hell, I'm onto something here. So, and I also got quite a few followers from that one. So I then made a very similar style video, but amplified it. So for context, in that video, I broke down how much income tax and national insurance you would pay on a £30,000 salary. So I thought, well, what if I do the same thing, but for a 60,000 salary, where it's a little bit more complicated, there's more tax brackets. So I did that. And something really interesting happened, where it was a bit more of a controversial post, because the people who were earning £60,000 were annoyed they were paying so much tax, and the people who were earning not so much money were annoyed that the people who were earning £60,000 were annoyed that they were paying so much tax. It was really funny. And that one did about 200,000 views, and I thought, bloody hell, I'm really on something here.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to just immediately do one more of a similar style, so I did a few other things that didn't work so well. And after about a month, I did one more of a similar style, which was £110,000, and broke down the tax on that. And that did 700,000 views. And that was what I considered my first truly viral video.
Yeah.
And that one post alone got me 2,500 followers.
Yeah.
And I thought that was crazy. And it was that post, that was the kind of the pinnacle moment. I thought, wow, I'm on something here. And from that moment onwards, all of my videos and content started getting more views. I was also then getting comments on a regular basis. I was then starting to build a bit of a community. I then started to do like a weekly Q&A on my content and things like that. And since then, I've built this little community of people where I get regular comments from the same people and things like that. And I'm no longer just farting in the wind. And that was a really pivotal point for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you're able to, it's so bad, but if you're able to make any content that can create some kind of a little bit of controversy and start a conversation happening, I think it does amplify and boost. That's what I've seen.
Well, the most popular videos I've had two posts that have got 2 million views, and they were both a little bit controversial.
Yeah.
Not for horribly wrong reasons. It's just two people with conflicting opinions.
Exactly. And then people going back and forth in the comments, then that boosts it to the algorithm, and then you just have a further reach. And that's just the name of the game. That's just the way it currently is. Unfortunately, sometimes you get actual people who are doing purposeful rage bait, and that I get sucked into that as well. And it's just
don't we all?
Yeah. So as you've mentioned, you've built a strong following as at Wealth by Alex on Instagram. So why do you think more financial advisors should be on social media?
So when I started advising, I read a book called Ikigai, which is a Japanese book. It's really interesting. And it's all about finding your purpose in life. And I personally think it's really important that we find purpose in life. I don't think we should just work and die, frankly. I think that purpose is what gives people that ambition to live a fulfilled life. And Ikigai is about finding purpose, essentially. There's more to it than that, but I won't spoil the book. And for me, I really enjoyed giving financial advice, but it's very time consuming to give it on a one-on-one basis. There's only so many clients I can effectively service if I'm spending 2 hours with each client or 1 hour with each client, etc. So I thought, how can I reach a broader audience and help more people? And social media was my answer. So that was the reason I started it, not necessarily to make money or anything like that. It was to help more people. But off the back of it, the byproduct of gaining more followers and doing stuff like that and the amount of work I put into it, I've actually ended up getting more clients through social media than any other channel of work. So, we have walk-ins in the office. I go to a networking event every week. We've done leafleting and other traditional marketing means. All of that combined doesn't get me as many clients as my Instagram page does now. And the clients I get from Instagram are higher quality leads as well. Clients where I can help them on a greater capacity due to maybe where they live or the demographic of client, etc. So I think that it's a real gap where financial advisors are missing out on. They shouldn't do it just to get clients. They should do it to help people because there are people that need help. But it's that's the byproduct that you can get clients from it as well. So it's a double benefit. It's a win-win. You get to help the nation become more educated. And as a byproduct, you will ultimately get clients from that and be remunerated for your efforts. So I think that's why.
Right. But on the other side of that, there are probably some advisors who have worries that social media might risk their professional credibility. So what would you say to those people?
That's a good question. So although I started in August 23, I wanted to start probably around January 23. And I had to have back and forth with my compliance team for like 6 months because there's so much regulation and rigidity about what you can and can't say. They were worried that we might get in trouble and things like this. So yeah, loads of back and forth, and we were saying, do we have to put disclaimers in there? How do we register what we put online? And I won't bore you with the story, but essentially we came to an agreement of how we would do it.
Okay.
And it's largely at my discretion in agreement with the compliance manager at my work. And I think people just need to make sure that, one, they're obviously clued up.
Mm-hmm.
Two, they're ideally qualified. Three, if you're going to post something, it's always prudent just to double check what you're going to post. So let's say I post something about income tax. Well, I know the income tax rates, and if they change, my job is to keep up to date with that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's prudent just to double check them, even if you know it. Just spend 30 seconds double checking it on the government website, just to make sure that we get tired from time to time, we get forgetful from time to time. Just fact check yourself before you post something, because on the off chance something goes viral and gets 1 million views, you could actually spread misinformation, and you have a responsibility not to do that. Mm-hmm. And when you become a trusted person online, sometimes people rely more on me than they do on the news for their financial information. That's a big responsibility. I've only got 10,000 followers, but that's still 10,000 potential people that are relying on me as a trusted source of information. Yeah. I can't lead them astray, or that reflects really badly on me. And credibility is important. So it's just a case of knowing your stuff, but then also fact checking yourself, staying up to date with your stuff. And this is why advisors have to do CPD and stuff like that. So I wouldn't be scared of it. I would just hold yourself to a higher standard.
Yeah. And I would also argue that probably more and more, just dependent on like the way different generations access their information, I think more and more people are getting their news from social media as opposed to watching, traditional news sources. So if anything, that is even more of a reason why to join these platforms, because before we started recording, we were talking about all the, finfluencers out there who don't have qualifications, who are able just to spew whatever they want, and they don't have a compliance team that are telling them, no, don't do this, don't do that, because they're just picking up a camera and just saying whatever, and then getting a lot of people into very bad situations. But if there's people like you who are able to garner a following and be a trusted source, I think that is just a net positive for everyone.
I agree. And on your latter point about, where people get information from, YouTube is a bigger search engine than Google these days. TikTok's average demographic is like 45 now. It's changed so much. On the point about influencers, quite a few of close friends I've made from social media aren't qualified. They're not advisors, and they are just, for example, money coaches. Some of them will have like a money coaching qualification, so not a diploma in advice or anything like that. But on the point I made about holding yourself to a higher standard, they do that. And some of them will actually hold themselves to a higher standard than advisors that I know. So I don't necessarily have a problem with influencers, although that's a funny word that I don't really like. As long as, for me, it's all about people holding themselves to a higher standard, making sure they're staying up to date with stuff. But some online influencers even go out of their way to get the qualification when they don't even have to, which I respect a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And what's been the hardest part of building an online presence? Is it the algorithms? Have you dealt with trolls? Or is it just the constant need to generate content ideas?
It's a good question. So there have been trolls, and they've been really funny, but not many. People do worry about things like that. So, I've spoken to friends in the past who have said, I'd like to make a video about this or stop posting about this, but I'm worried about what people will think of me. People are normally more worried about what their friends or family will think of them rather than what strangers will think of them. And I've had nothing but support. I remember, funnily enough, it got to that August, and I actually had approval from compliance in July to post. And I thought, right, well, I can start posting. It took me a whole month to upload my first video because I was scared.
Yeah.
And it got to August, and I put it off for a month, and I literally said to a colleague, here's the camera, we're going to the park around the corner from my office, just film me. And I just said like 40 seconds of waffle on the camera and hit upload, and I said, right, it's done now. I'm out there. There's no turning back. And from that moment, the weight was gone. I didn't feel scared anymore because I put myself out there, and I'd almost held myself accountable then. I was like, well, I've told the world I'm going to do something. I need to do it now. Yeah. And then it was fine. From a troll point of view, the only negative comments I've had is from time to time I grow a little mustache. It started off as Movember, but then I kept it for like 6 months. Sometimes people make funny comments about that. And one person once told me I have a really horrible nose, and that was as far as it went, and that was it. But it makes me laugh, because I frankly know that if people spread negativity, it's only coming from their own internal insecurities.
Yeah, and they generally won't have like a profile. They won't have their public persona out there. It'll just be some blank image.
Like an old egg on Twitter or something.
Yeah.
It's just a nobody. So as long as you can, not take things. Sometimes people will take it to heart. It depends how sensitive people are, but they're normally just like nothing comments. They're not going to be really, really hurtful or anything like that. And again, as long as you are credible, you're respectful online, you're not saying really horrible things, there's nothing that anyone could say that's really bad about you.
And it's so bizarre that they would even like talk about your appearance when you're talking about finance. I thought because you're in like the finance niche, the trolls might be coming at you for
about
something to do with the information you're saying.
When someone commented on my nose, about 7 of my followers replied to that person just defending me.
Yeah,
which was like the nicest thing.
Yeah.
So, really nice.
But when it comes
to fully answer your question, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
The hardest thing has been to stay committed to it and to be consistent with it.
Yeah.
So when I first started, I set myself a target of doing 5 posts a week. So I would do Monday to Friday, different styles of posts, but every day.
Mm-hmm.
That was really exhausting and I got a little burnt out. So then I dropped down to 3 a week. That's made it a lot easier. But even sometimes doing 3 a week, when you have, events coming up or even you're maintaining a social life, and especially since becoming a father, it's so challenging. So sometimes I'll do 2, sometimes I'll do 1. And then I remember the first year I started, I did 12 days of Christmas of posting. I did 12 days in a row, all videos. That was so exhausting. So I had a week off. And after that 1 week off, it was so hard to get back into it. So consistency, especially when you're not getting engagement, you feel like you're not getting anywhere. That's when most people will give up. But you kind of have to just push through that barrier. And that's what will pay off.
Okay. And you talk a lot about financial education. Why do you think the world desperately needs more of it, as you put it?
Because as an advisor particularly, I meet a lot of people who are quite sadly not prepared enough when it comes to, frankly, later life, but also who are not protected in present life. So as an advisor, I cover a lot of different areas. So things like pensions, retirement planning, investments, protection, insurance, inheritance tax, trust, very, very broad. And there's a lot of different areas where people don't need to know everything, of course, because that's the reason I have a job, frankly, I'm grateful for. But if people just had like a little snippet into each one, they would be able to cover themselves more. Whereas a lot of people's, the extent of their knowledge is kind of savings. And that's kind of where it ends. They might know a little bit about workplace pension. So to give context, I've had people walk into the office before who are 55. They've been self-employed all their life. They've not had a workplace pension because they're self-employed. And they said, I'd kind of like to retire in 5 years' time. What are my options? And I say, well, do you have a pension? No. Have you got any savings? Well, no, I spent it all on holidays, over the last 40 years or whatever. And I'm thinking, well, your options are bugger all, frankly. You can basically live on nothing for the next 12 years and then live on state pension plus a little bit, or you can carry on going on holiday for 12 years and live on state pension. That's it, really. And it's very sad. And if from the age of, let's say, 21 or 18, they had learned, if you're self-employed, if you choose to be self-employed from an early age, you're not going to have a workplace pension. So you need to have a private pension. This is how tax relief works. This is how it works. It gets invested. Just like, it doesn't have to go into detail. It's just, these are the benefits of it. This is the drawback. This is what your life might look like in the future if you don't do this. Just relatively simple stuff to help particularly self-employed people, because they really struggle a lot. And self-employed people as well, they don't get sick pay. They don't get holiday pay. If you're, for example, a tradesperson, you're more prone to being injured. So they might look at things like income protection insurance. I had one client come in, their child was a roofer. they were up and down ladders all the time. They fell off the ladder, broke their back, and they were off work for 6 months. They were self-employed and don't get sick pay. They still had a mortgage to pay, council tax, bills. What do they do? But there are insurances you can get to cover you that might cost £20-30 a month, and they'll just ease that burden. But where do you learn about this stuff? We don't, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it should be in the curriculum or not, because I actually I've taught in Leicester College, so I'm from Leicestershire. Leicester College invited me in to do lessons for their 16, 17-year-olds on mortgages, pensions, investing, savings, things like that. And the kids aren't that interested. Some of them really are. Some of them love it. But everyone preaches about, let's get all this stuff in schools. But if you go and try and tell a 16-year-old about this stuff, I remember being 16 and not really listening that much.
Yeah.
These kids don't really care that much. It's not until we become an adult that we're actually we start thinking, oh, I wish I'd learned this stuff. But that's because you're an adult.
Yeah.
So we need to figure out whether it's in universities, maybe we start teaching it, or I don't know. There's a solution somewhere. It's just figuring out what that is. But more education needs to exist.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to think, but then, not everyone goes to university. So then you'd need to also fill that gap. So it's really difficult. Like, I think it's easy for people to scream and shout and say, we need more financial education. But like you're saying, as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, that's future me's problem. I don't care. I think that was my thought process back then.
Exactly.
But yeah. So you've held hundreds of one-to-one sessions. Are there any recurring financial myths or blind spots you see over and over again?
That's a great question. A very, very common one that people tend not to know, I guess, comes back to education. And bear in mind that quite a lot of the one-to-ones I have are through Instagram, and a big demographic I have is in London, so they tend to be slightly higher earners. Is that you pay tax on savings.
Okay.
A lot of people just don't know this. So people will typically just, they'll earn money, put it in a savings account, and then idly not know that. Okay. So if you exceed, you've got something called a personal savings allowance. It's either £1,000, £500 or nothing, depending on what your income tax band is. And if you exceed that, then you will pay tax on your savings, depending on how much interest you get. Whereas with the cash ISA, you don't pay any tax. So that's just something that a lot of people miss out on. A lot of people I talk to about are completely and utterly clueless about investing. A lot of people don't even know their pensions are invested at all.
Yeah.
That's a really big one. So they have this assumption that their pension is a pot of money. And it's funny because
that just grows.
They'll say to me, I've got this old workplace pension from 4 years ago. I'm not paying into it. But the value's changed. The value's gone up by £300 or something. And I'm like, well, do you know why? And they say, no. And I'm like, well, it's invested, it's in this and this and this and this. And then they're like, I had no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would say if I wasn't in this line of work, I would probably also be in the same boat. A pension was just this thing that I knew I had, and I just imagined and grew. I didn't look too much into how it grows or what happens. I didn't know that, it gets invested in different funds, and you can even look into what funds, and you can specifically say, if you might want more ESG funds or something like that, you can specifically target that. But this is, again, going back to the financial education piece. People aren't aware of that. And I think I do my little part by trying to tell those around me so they're more aware.
Which is amazing. I think if everyone tells one person, then, it's like wildfire.
It can spread. It's like a network of people that will be more and more educated. Maybe that's the solution to financial education.
We just tell everyone to tell one person, and then everyone knows.
Yeah. So what are your ambitions for the next few years? More content, having a bigger firm? Where do you see yourself going?
So definitely more content. So I think to learn more about content and learn more about social media, it's definitely changing. So compared to when I first started, it's changed. So images were fruitful. And then about 6 months in, they weren't anymore, and it was all about video. But now it's going a little bit back towards like swiping posts. It changes so frequently, and even like the shapes of pictures have now changed. I think it's forever changing. I've never been able to crack TikTok, so maybe I need to learn that one. I would love to do YouTube. I would really love to do long form YouTube content, because with short form content on Instagram and TikTok and things like that, there is only so much you can explain in 45 to 60 seconds. That's typically what someone's attention span will deal with. Although you can do like 5-minute videos on Instagram.
Yeah.
I think, will someone actually sit through and watch that? I don't know. I've never tried it.
Maybe on 2x speed. I've done it.
Yeah. I talk quite quick anyway sometimes. It would become a blur. Whereas on YouTube, I think that's an area I would really, really like to do. But I know that sometimes even a 45-second video can make me an hour and a half to make.
Yeah.
So if I translate that to a 10-minute YouTube video, is that going to take me 10 hours to make? It's a real time commitment. So I need to figure out the logistics of that. So that, I guess, that's the content side. From a business point of view, I would really like to grow something fantastic. I'd like to figure out how that looks. From an advice point of view, the advice industry is really interesting, because I think for up until the last couple of years, it's just been the same for so long. And I don't think that's right, because that doesn't fit with how the future of advice should be. I think there are so many people in unique situations where they almost need tailored advice to work for them. Yeah. And that includes things like different charging structures, different advice. And up until maybe like 20, I think COVID was probably the thing that changed it. I think up until COVID, it was almost everyone paid the same percentage initial fee. Everyone paid the same percentage ongoing fee. It was just this, you have to fit in this box. And if you don't fit in the box, you don't get financial advice. And that's what's caused the advice gap, in my opinion. And it's why people have got this, one, trust issues with advisors. Two, they think they can't afford advisors. Three, they don't like advisors. It's terrible. And I think I've seen a lot more advisors now pop up that I've met over the last few months, luckily, who are creating advice firms that are outside of that box, or it's almost a box with an open lid, or it's like a box that can change shape to fit you, which is really nice. So that's really interesting.
Okay. And if you could change one thing about financial advice as a profession in the UK today, what would it be? Would it be the fees thing that you just mentioned?
Okay, yeah. But essentially, largely what I just spoke about. I think the fee structure is such a complicated debate. It's the most debated thing in financial advice profession, both from an initial fee point of view and an ongoing fee point of view. Initial fees, I guess, to give more context, you probably hear about this a lot. Initial fees up until 2020, I think the most common fee structure was just 3% and 1%. Was that the most common fee structure? And that would be 3% of your initial investment and 1% of your ongoing investment, unless you're the biggest firm in the UK, which was like 5% of your initial investment, which was kind of preposterous. And it's a lot, because if someone's got £300,000, you're paying. Okay, the best example I can give is, and this is one that I've brought up at work a few times because I think it's daft. You can have two people come to you. One person's got £300,000 in cash that they want to invest. One person's got 20 pensions that all add up to £300,000. The amount of work involved in researching those 20 pensions is astronomical versus investing £300,000. But because it's percentage based, you're charging the same.
Yeah.
How does that make any sense?
No.
It doesn't. No. If you went to a solicitor and said, I want you to do 20 pieces of work or one piece of work, the fee would be so different.
Yeah.
So for me, a percentage-based initial fee doesn't quite work. And I've heard all sorts of weird and wacky people trying to justify it. And for me, it's just rubbish. So I don't think that makes sense. The percentage ongoing fee sort of makes sense. But again, I don't think it should be indefinite. I think whether it should stop at some point or whether it should be tiered down at some point, that's something I have to think about a lot. But again, there needs to be some sort of reform. I don't know if the FCA, since Consumer Duty came in last year, which is all about fair value, that's made a lot of firms rethink their fees, which I'm happy about. But I don't know if the FCA needs to do something beyond that, maybe. Because I have met some advisors who charge astronomical amounts for a single client. And in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking, how do you justify that?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking you can't just pin it all down to, their investments are growing by this. Because I'm thinking they could do that themselves.
Yeah.
From an actual, what advice are you giving to justify that amount?
Years of experience. I don't know.
They're not quite a Picasso, are they?
I think, yeah, it's definitely something that I've seen being brought up by advisors, and I think the FCA have said at some point there will be, some consultation on that. So again, it's one to watch for the future. But this was a really great conversation, Alex. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me on. It was really lovely to meet you.
Thank you for listening to In Conversation With. We do hope that you enjoyed it. Please do keep up to date with all our new releases via Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your podcasts from. You can also keep up to date with all our new content published on the Money Marketing website, as well as our print edition Money Marketing magazine. So make sure to subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. See you next time.